He lived in constant pain and suffering. The only moments when he didn't have those engulfing feelings were when he indulged in his most degenerate acts, whether it was executing or coupling with many willing or sometimes even unwilling participants. He felt the most like himself, but it was always a constant battle with himself, a contradictory feeling of wanting to dominate and conquer, but having it not be ever so easy. Patrick Bateman was born into an influential and affluent family, not to mention the looks and skills he needed to take over his father's companies, not really having to do any real work from a very young age. Everything was just so easy, almost not worth taking, but he still did. It's what he lived for. He just wished they struggled a bit more. After killing Paul Allen and having Detective Kimball open an investigation into his late co-worker's disappearance, although deep down he did wish for a chase, for resistance, the stress of the situation was getting to him, leading him to delve deeper into his depravity, ultimately leading to a pursuit from which he did not know if he was going to escape. As he hid from the helicopter, searching for him, he called his lawyer and confessed. But this is where our story diverges, with just one small detail. Instead of staying still, the helicopter moved ever so slightly forward, setting forth a chain of events that would change this young serial killer's fate forever. As soon as the searchlight intensified, he shot up from where he was hiding and bolted again for his door. But something was different about it. It seemed off. It was miscolored and there seemed to be another doorknob stuck to it. But he heard the chopper blades growing louder and his shadow deepened, leading him to quickly open the door and take steps into a yellow carpeted room. Patrick Bateman's mind wasn't exactly the most stable. He knew it himself to some extent. In fact, his previous pursuit could have been a bit exaggerated, or perhaps everything he felt and experienced was exaggerated. His sudden stepping into a room with crumbling wallpaper and a damp yellow carpet did little to stop his imagination as a chopper flew into the room with him, the blades just nearly missing Patrick. He smelled gasoline pouring from the chopper and smoke started to fill the large room he found himself in. He even heard some groaning of a man in great pain. But Patrick Bateman knew what happened to helicopters that crashed. He has seen plenty of movies. He began sprinting away from the wreckage, and the sound of groaning cries for help grew louder, but they were quickly emulated by a huge explosion, which sent Patrick Bateman flying further forwards. The young heir to Pierce and Pierce fell face first into the moist carpet, making his suit just wet enough to make it very uncomfortable. He got up and quickly checked his front suit pockets. At least his business cards were still intact. He began rubbing them passionately, trying to somehow snap his mind back to reality. His mind had played tricks on him before, but this was really weird and foreign, just like the time he had Quaaludes. So that's what it was, he thought to himself. He did not remember taking any substances, but he must have. Nothing else could explain this chain of events. Patrick began walking away from the wreckage and assumed that he had to snap out of it eventually. The decor in this place was super tacky and outdated, nothing compared to his office spaces. Not to mention the most awful, moist, moldy smell, as if no one had cleaned in ages. But the most disturbing thing was the emptiness. No furniture, no people. As Patrick walked towards the furthest wall, he could hear this awful squishing noise his shoes made with every step. At a certain point, he even seemed to sink slightly into the carpet, just deep enough to wet his socks. He started freaking out, losing his composure and screaming for assistance. No answer. He shuffled between his need for attention and his insanity, though one could argue that they were one and the same. Patrick took his knife out from his suit and flipped it open. He repeatedly stabbed the carpet, making it ooze an odd red liquid that Patrick thought was blood. This brought him some amusement as he continued shanking while screaming, which led to heavy breaths, eventually stopping. He adjusted his suit as a small fire began to die down, but he continued his walk, as wet and uncomfortable as he may have been. Patrick never felt anything as annoying as whatever this room he was in. There was no doors to speak of, and all the rooms looked like the same monotone rooms he had been in before, and that awful humbuzz made from the old light fixtures like a broken and unfindable metronome. His intense outburst at wet socks had only been the beginning of his tantrums, as anything and everything about the Backrooms set him off, leading him to repeat the same outburst over and over again. He stabbed the walls, floors, and even supplies he had found as he put no real value to them. and after about half a day of mindlessly walking and stabbing everything in sight, Patrick Bateman had enough. He was exhausted, so he laid down, not caring anymore about the wet carpet that engulfed him, and he began to drift off to sleep until he heard movement, the same quashing noise he had grown accustomed to as he himself used to make. He sprung up from his fetal position, free at last, he thought to himself, only to come face to face with a disgusting, homeless girl, on all fours. At least that's how Patrick saw her. In reality, what he was staring at was a stray hound, led here by Patrick's outburst and never-ending noise. The urge to attack this woman was inescapable to Patrick, but he knew he needed help. The situation was starting to feel too real. Listen, darling, you're looking rather splendid this fine evening. I'm sorry for the noise I've been making, just, chasing some kid took my wallet and ended up here. What is this place, by the way? Looks like a demolition project waiting to happen. If you ask me, you see, I know a guy, Trump. I bet he bought this huge office space just to tear it down, but I bet he just forgot. Anyways, beautiful, could you help a guy out? I need to urgently get to a charity event for autistic young girls. I'm going to donate about half of the fund, and I know that they'll have this amazing fugu, pufferfish sushi, which I know you'd love. You look like a sushi gal. And, well, what I'm trying to say is, if you go to the event with me. The hound made no noise, and instead started to walk backward. Patrick took out his knife from his suit pocket, all dented and bent from stabbing random objects all day. Listen, you dumb, ugly bitch. Get me the fuck out of here, or I'll take your entrails out. Patrick Bateman looked at the hound with intense hatred and disgust. If the American psycho couldn't get the hound to cooperate nicely, well, he had no use for it. Bateman lunged at the heels of the hound, which he actually managed to grab. It yelped as it felt a dull yet persistent blade dig into his thigh, but the creature suddenly found some courage and slashed at Patrick's hand, which was grabbing its Achilles tendon. You fucking bitch, I'll fucking kill you. Patrick Bateman quickly got on his feet and ran after the hound, which was quickly limping away from its injury. They ran through big and small rooms, jumped over shafts, and even rummaged through some vines, which Patrick paid no mind to as he was still chasing. Eventually, he saw the creature crawl into a small space in one of the walls. Patrick came upon the same wall with a hole in it, with no other entrances. Patrick at this point was beyond exhaustion. He was thirsty, hungry, but the sheer audacity that this woman would fight back and even harm him drove him mad. He began kicking the rotted wood and drywall, which separated him and the hound. He kicked again and again with no care in the world, until finally Patrick Bateman broke through and stared at the hound in the dark corner, scared and alone and facing a monster not from this reality. I can't fucking see anything in here, though considering how ugly you are, that might be for the best. The weakened hound cried as it was grabbed by its ankle and dragged out of its hole into the light of the back rooms. Patrick Bateman then proceeded to do unspeakable acts against this backrooms entity, and later its corpse. He found himself crawling into the same hole that the hound was staying in. It stinks, but it was dry. As he lay down with a satisfied mind and a full stomach, he felt a bunch of items near his legs. He began rummaging through them in the dark until eventually he found what he thought was a flashlight and flipped it on. The creature had been hoarding items, supplies in its den. Various bones were put off to the side, and the matting he was laying on was made of hair and various ripped clothing, but most importantly, vital supplies. Well, for anybody else, but for Patrick Bateman, he found a true hidden gem within this stockpile of goodies, an old but still usable Sony Walkman. He slept within the dark den, calmly listening, and with all his basic needs satisfied. Patrick Bateman, or the Backroom Psycho, never felt so alive. Whatever he was on, it was the best.